All right, welcome to episode 10 of the Surviving Second Gen podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Hippolyte, and I want to talk about this today because I actually had a friend that I talked to that said to me one time, they were like, I feel like because of the way that my parents raised me, and this was a person who is a child of immigrants, who was saying that, I feel like the way that my parents didn't really allow me to be independent, it's making me struggle in the workplace. Like, I struggle in showing up in the workplace. I struggle with meeting expectations. I struggle with standing up for myself. I just struggle in the workplace. And I was like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we need to talk about it because, that really sparked something in me that made me realize that, a lot of us are struggling to show up in the workplace in the way that we want to and in the way that is expected, because of the lack of independence that we were able to grow in pivotal stages in our lives. I mean, when we think back to the episode where I was talking about the stages of development and the expectations in that stage, especially that adolescent stage, that stage where you are in school, when you're supposed to be understanding career dynamics, understanding how to set yourself up to be successful in the workplace as an adult. And a lot of that has to do with learning how to be independent. But when you think about a household, an immigrant household, a lot of that is not encouraged. There's not a lot of independence that is encouraged. A lot of times, it's more so discouraged. It's more so collectivist slash codependent. I'm not gonna say slash collectivist, or can lead to codependent type of mindset versus allowing that child to be independent. And what's happening is it shows up in adulthood when a child has to be very much independent in the workplace and have an free thinking mindset in almost any and every job, and that child not being able to do so because they weren't given that opportunity to have a free thinking mindset. The mindset that's encouraged a lot in a immigrant household is not free thinking. And when I say free thinking, it's being able to make your own judgments from a particular situation. Make your own decisions based on things that are happening in and around your life. In a lot of immigrant households, when you're a second generation immigrant, you're struggling to have that independence, that ability to think freely, that ability to make your own decisions without the input of your family members, especially like your parents. You're fighting for that. And if you're living in the household, a lot of times that battle is a hard one. Like, especially like if you're living in the household, that battle is a hard one. Even if you're a full grown adult who has a job, making their own money, doing all the things, it's hard. So imagine being an adult, still living in the household and still fighting to have a free thinking mindset, but then you have to get up and go to work and be in an environment where they want you to be a free thinker. Ooh, the cognitive dissonance. Like, it's basically, I'm a child at home, but I'm at work, I'm supposed to be an adult. Yeah. Like, how does one do that? So it's so complicated. you know, like culturally, there's so many things that you're fighting. And again, like you're fighting being placed in this box that is so hard to, like, I personally counsel and work with young adults who are children of immigrants who are fighting this battle every day, who literally feel like a child when they are at home. So at home, they have certain rules and regulations and, just ideas that they have to follow that basically you would tell like a 14-year-old to follow. And then that same person has to then turn that off, kind of, sort of, because even when they are outside of their household, they're constantly being checked up on as if they are a child. So they kind of sort of have to turn that off, but not all the way, because if they do, they're going to offend the parent at home if they are not being available or showing up in the way that that parent wants them, even outside of the household. So they can never completely turn that off, right? So imagine carrying that with you, not completely being able to turn that off, and then going into a workplace where they want you to turn it completely off. There's no being a child in the workplace. You have to be an adult who can think freely, who can make your own decisions, who can initiate things, like take initiative, be a leader. And if you're still fighting to be able to have those skills, then yeah, of course you're going to be struggling in the workplace to like authentically show up in that way and like have those skills. And I've heard a lot of people struggle with imposter syndrome, which is basically feeling like you're not meant to be in the room that you're in. Your experiences are not good enough to be receiving the recognition that you're receiving or given the responsibility that you're given. And I totally understand how deep imposter syndrome is. And how do I say this? Like, I get it, but it also saddens me how deep it runs in a person to the point where they don't even feel capable to just do the job that they were literally trained to do, like went to school for, has experience in. Like, the imposter syndrome is so deep that like they don't even believe that they're good enough, even though they literally like have above and beyond the skills to do what they're doing, if that makes sense. Like, that saddens me, because that's how deep imposter syndrome runs in certain people. So yeah, just the levels of it, like, again, I understand it, and I've talked about it before, but yeah, to literally feel like you don't even deserve the job that you have, even though you have all the degrees, you've done all the experience and all these things, like, imposter syndrome is crippling you, But again, it goes back to, imagine being in this household where you're not an adult, basically, in their eyes, and how they treat you. And you have to turn it on. Even when you're like not living in the household, there's still, again, I still work with people and talk with people who deal with this control that immigrant parents are trying to have on them, even while they are living outside of the household. So this may be, a 20-something-year-old woman most of the time living on her own in her own place. And then you have a mom and or dad who's trying to pull the strings, and control what they're doing, where they're going. So, that may be literally like, popping up on them, or, calling them at times where you don't need a phone call, or asking questions about what they're doing that's like super invasive, just trying to control the narrative of how this child shows up, in the world. And yeah, imagine, so even though you're not in the household, you still have this parent trying to control how you show up. You're still trying to manage that and still exert yourself as a, fully whole adult. But then you have to wake up and go to work where they expect you to know how to be a fully whole adult and do all the things that adults do. Struggle to say the least. So, it saddens me. It really does, because, the thing is, second generation immigrants are usually very educated, like very much educated, more than enough, in the field that they're in, like more than qualified to do the jobs that they do. However, they're the ones struggling with feeling qualified, feeling like they belong in the place that they are in. And that's problematic to me. Like it's unfortunate, because, this child is carrying all of this narrative in the cultural context that they're in, that they're not a fully grown adult, in the way that they're treated, in the way that they're spoken to, in the lack of confidence in them, like all these things that are perpetuating this narrative in their mind that they're not a fully grown adult that is capable, even though everything else shows that they are. But if everything else shows us that they are, like on paper they are, and they don't feel it, or they don't even, carry the skills to show that, then yeah, they're not going to be successful in the workplace. They're not going to be successful in their career, right? Like, you can be great on paper all day, right? But if you go into that interview and you suck at it, they're not going to hire you. Like, you can be great on paper all day, but if you have to give a presentation and your public speaking skills suck, or your persuasive skills suck, then yeah, your performance rating is not going to be so great. Or, if you consistently show up in that way, your job may be on the line. So yeah, like it's unfortunate when the skills and the ability doesn't add up to the performance. And I don't think it's because they can't perform. I think it's because they haven't been given the opportunity to really hone those skills. So the times that they were growing up, especially in the adolescence age, where those skills were supposed to be honed, where they're supposed to be given chances to make decisions, to analyze things, to make observations and comment on those things, they couldn't do so. And for that reason, that person becomes an adult who doesn't even recognize that they can tap into those skills. So I say that to say that it's never too late. Like, it's never too late to learn those things. And my advice for a second generation immigrant who's struggling in that area, the workplace area, to show up, is to do everything that you can to learn those skills in your everyday life. So, you don't have to focus on honing in on all those skills in the workplace, because honestly, you don't have that grace. Like corporate America, they don't play that. Like most jobs, they don't play that. Like it's frustrating, and this is more of a fault of like the American society in the first place, is the way that they want you to show up into a job and just know it all, even though you've never had that job. Make it make sense. Like, make it make sense. It doesn't matter how much education that you've gotten. If you don't have real life experience in that particular field, there's still some gaps. Like, there just is. Like, I remember, and me and my best friend talk about this all the time when we were school counselors, and how much, to be a school counselor, you have to get a master's degree, right? So we went and got our master's degree in school counseling. We learned all the things. And then when we became a school counselor and actually got into a school, there was so much crap that we had to like just literally learn on the job. Like, imagine like my first year as a school counselor coming into a school system, like you think you're good, you're set up to go. And there's so much that they don't tell you in the program that practically applies in doing the work. So it wasn't that I wasn't educated enough. I knew all the things. I could pass all the tests, all of that. But there are just some things that show up in the work that you just don't learn in a school setting that is very much structured in a certain way that exposes you to a certain curriculum. Even though on top of that, we took an internship. So there was a time that I spent a whole year in a school. But even then, as an intern, there's still a level of access that I didn't have that a regular school counselor had. So there's still some things that I did not see until I was an actual school counselor. And I was like, oh, I ain't learned that in school. But here we go. Like, I gotta learn it now because that's what the principal expects me to do, so I gotta do it. So, I learned those things on my own, or sometimes I had to consult with other people who've been, doing it for a while. So all that to say, like, there's just some things that no matter how much experience you have, you just don't know it until, or no matter how much knowledge you have or degrees you have, you just don't know it until you get into that space. But the jobs don't tell you that. They make you feel like, oh, you went to school for this, or either way, they just make it seem like you need to come in knowing everything, and they don't give grace. Like, if you don't know everything, it's almost like, well, what are you doing? Like, how do you not know how to do this? Like you should know how to do this, like that's just what it is, even though you've never stepped in this particular environment ever before. So with that, there is a lot of pressure to already know things, especially when it comes to almost the basic level skills that are not like specific to that job, right? So intuition, leadership, ability to work with others, critical thinking. Those are all like foundational skills that basically all jobs require. Like, those are not things that are like, oh, you only do that if you're a doctor, or you only do that if you're a construction worker. Like, basically all jobs, you got to be able to have those skills. So if it's not a specific skill that has to do with that job type, they expect you to know it. So imagine trying to learn how to be intuitive on the job. And then if you don't know how to be intuitive correctly, you make a huge mistake and mess up a project, or endanger the lives of the customers that you're serving, or the clients or the patients. Like, Imagine, so it's like there's a risk when trying to learn these foundational skills on the job, which is why I say don't try to push yourself to learn that on the job. Try to find ways in your real life to have these skills. So what does that look like? It could be, certain things that you get to do in the community for free. So it's not paid work, right? It could be some volunteer work that you do in your community where you get to lead a group of people in some type of way, or come together and work on some type of initiative. I know, like currently, right now, as a counselor, I serve on a couple of boards, board / coalitions, and in those boards and coalitions, we have meetings. So we have meetings where different people have the opportunity to lead the meetings, or take notes in the meetings. Or there's opportunities where they, need people to do like certain things, maybe be a speaker at a conference or something like that. Those are all opportunities for me or anyone who isn't in that type of a group to hone in on certain skills. So, let's say I never like did any public speaking before. This is a no pressure opportunity, right? To like show up and learn how to do that. I mean, not saying that, you could totally bomb the whole thing, but it's not like this spotlight of like, oh, if you do this, you could lose your job, or, there's a huge consequence. Like, it's an opportunity for you to learn these things, learn how to work with other people, learn how to manage, a group of people, not necessarily like being like over them or being their boss, but like manage a group of people. Say if you're like leading a meeting. So that right there is an example of a space where I as a person has an opportunity to learn and show up and hone in on these skills that I may not have because of the environment that I was raised in. When I think about critical thinking and things like that, I think about how important it is to think on your feet. Like that's really important. I don't know in any job where you don't have to think on your feet. Like something happens and you just have to really figure out like, okay, what do I do next? And sometimes if you get an opportunity to shadow somebody, that's a really good way to see what's happening in real life in that particular field and see how they handle things. And, you can ask somebody in the field that you're trying to work with to see if you can get that opportunity to do so. Because again, that may not be something that you want to try to learn on the job. If you're like actively trying to make that a really good skill for you, because that lack of intuition and you messing up on the job can cost a lot. But if you get the opportunity to show up in the environment that's very similar to yours and get to see somebody actually having to be intuitive to a certain situation, that can help you really see how you can do it yourself. And, possibly in that situation, they can help you, actually deal with it, yourself. And then you can get feedback from them on, okay, did I handle that correctly? Or, what did you think of, how I worked through that situation? So yeah, it gives you the opportunity to learn that intuition in a space where there's not as much pressure. So I think basically just doing more hands-on experience things is what's going to teach you some of these skills, because you can only do so much reading. Like, and I'm not against like reading to learn more things, but if you could do more practical reading, that's helpful. Something that can actually teach you to do it hands-on and give you like, basically some type of homework to actually try these things. Because again, these are not skills that like, let me read on how to be a critical thinker. No, you actually have to practice being a critical thinker. Like, you can't just read about it. I think therapy is another way that you can try to learn these skills. If you have a good therapist who, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a therapist. I think in this situation, I would even recommend like a career coach or a coach in general, like maybe some type of life coach, because it's not necessarily like in-depth work that you're doing. It's more so like it's coaching. Like, this person has to give you have the ability to coach you in like real life stuff, and not every therapist can be a coach. Some, I mean, yeah, coaching and therapy is different. So I think in this situation, when you get an effective coach, they can really help you apply like some skills that you can use in the real world and hold you accountable for doing those things. If you have a really good therapist, they can do that too, because there are therapists who can do that in their work and give you some real life tools that you can practice to hone those skills. But again, like I said, like the therapy and coaching is different. When we think about the type of skills that you're trying to learn, they may not be what a therapist is skilled or specialized in doing. But yeah, basically, I mean, it's okay to reach out to someone outside of yourself to hone in on those skills if that's what the person has an expertise in, right? Like, if they are someone who helps coach individuals in the workplace and show up in that workplace, like, that's somebody that you want to, reach out to and see if you could get that experience from them. So, yeah, it saddens me how deeply that, a lot of second generation immigrants are struggling with this thing because they still haven't managed to show up as an adult in their day-to-day life outside of the workplace. And that is where I do believe therapy does kick in, because if you have a culturally aware therapist, they can help you create the appropriate boundaries with your parent that you need to build up yourself to be the independent person that you want to be. And I say culturally aware because, and this is not all white therapists, but a therapist who is from this country and comes from simply a Western lens, they may say things to you like, well, why don't you just stop talking to your mom or dad? Or, like, why don't you just cut them off? Or, why don't you just move out? Or just things that, it sounds like it makes sense. Like, you could just easily do that if you don't want to deal with this situation and how they are leading you. But as we know, if you are a second generation immigrant, it's not that simple. the cultural nuances play a role in how you show up in a relationship with your parents and your extended family. So it's not necessarily just a cut off thing. There are situations where you may decide, yes, I'm cutting off my parents or this person or that person. It's understandable. There are situations. However, the majority of situations, that's not like the answer. So when you have someone who is a culturally sensitive therapist or counselor, they can help you understand how to make those steps, usually, kind of like in increments, to get to the place where you need to build that confidence to be the adult, show up as adult in your everyday life, which can also transfer into your career world. So that's how I would say, in the grand scheme of things, would be the most effective way to be able to show up in the career world. Like, all the things that I said before were practical ways, more quick to really help you implement those skills. And I think you can do those things in conjunction with therapy. Like, those things don't have to be done on their own without therapy. You can do both, or doesn't mean that you just have to do therapy and not do those things. But the work that you do with a culturally competent therapist or a counselor can be life-changing. Like, I do that work, and it's so rewarding for me because I know that I'm reaching that person in a place that other people can't reach them, because they don't know what it means to, be Russian or Japanese or Hungarian. Like, they don't know that. So they don't know all the things of that culture that impacts how that person moves, which doesn't mean I'm just cutting you off. Like, it means, like, how do I set the boundaries that I need to show up in the way that I need, but still have you as my parent. Because I'm not trying to cut you off, but I'm still trying to, like, coexist with you in a way that makes sense for me. So there's so much value in therapists that understand culture, and we need more of them. I'm just saying, I'm calling out to the people who may be listening. We need more of them, because the work is such a unique, niched work that everybody doesn't have that skill. So yeah, I feel like if you are a second generation immigrant and you're trying to get out of this just being stuck, in this relationship with your parents or a parent that is hindering how you show up in this world, try to find a culturally sensitive counselor that can help you work through that so that it can bleed into all parts of your life. And that's how you can overcome the workplace issues that you have. So that's what I'm leaving you all with today. I hope that this was helpful. Thank you again for tuning in to this episode of the Surviving Second Gen podcast. If nothing else, I do want you to tap into our YouTube channel, and I want to hear what you all have to say about this conversation, and I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.